Hello and welcome to the fourth webinar out of four in this series launching the book Zoe and Zach's Pain Hacks. Tonight I am going to talk to you about what kids think about pain science and about these books so far. I'm really excited to share this with you. So there's going to be a bunch of quotes and data heading towards a Q&A where we can talk about some of the questions I've received during the week, but also hopefully a couple of questions live as well. We'll see how we go for time. So, one comment I heard this week, which I think is really nice, they said it's the ultimate set of conversation starters for kids. And I think one of the nice ways of thinking about these books and pain science in general is giving a framework and a vocabulary to enable helpful discussions to occur. And not just generally vaguely helpful, like practically helpful discussions that can actually help long term and not just for short term relief and things like that. So let's dive into it. First, I want to just quickly explain the difference between concrete and abstract thinking. So if you have a look, younger kids are generally concrete thinkers, as per the title, versus abstract thinkers, which are probably more towards teens, like 13-year-olds. So general labels about pain. It bothers me, it hurts, or it doesn't hurt. It's weird, it's annoying. Everyone can say that. If you're a concrete thinker or an abstract thinker, like an adult or a teen, that's fine. The intensity, duration, and location, kids can do that quite reliably. It comes and goes, it hurts really bad, it feels like I could scream, it eases down slowly. So all those examples make a lot of sense for everyone. But for kids under 12, they don't always have this understanding of different metaphors and different specific labels. So things like, oh, it's like I've been stung by a bee, or it's like a dog bit you, or like elephants dancing in my head. And the reference to that paper from a long time ago, I think it was from the 1990s. Yeah, 1992 that paper was. It's called Elephants Dancing in My Head. A really good paper. But then even labels like bumping, stinging, bursting, they're not making a whole lot of sense. And I'll mention a few examples of this. But I guess the reason I'm bringing this up is because in education for kids, we want to speak the common vocabulary and the common language so that thinking is possible. And if we're speaking abstractly, it's not going to translate well at all. The last thing we want is misunderstandings or less communication. We want to open things up. So we did this study a few years ago now in BMJ Open, and a child's concept of pain varied upon their knowledge, it varied by their experiences, and it varied because of their literacy levels. So here's a quote from an 8-year-old boy who had persistent pain. He said, "Pain is about knowing you've hurt your knee and you need to stop playing." So using his own personal experience there. This girl who was 10, she was pain-free, she was trying to explain nociception, and she said, it's because like your nerves send it's like a phone call up to your brain saying, I just hurt myself. And then your brain will say, oh, that's going to hurt. And you go, oh. And when we questioned her, it was more like Bluetooth rather than a wired phone going up the nerve. It was really interesting, and which that fits with the model of predictive processing versus a standard biomedical model. We gave kids a gingerbread man cut picture here, and we said, can you label where you think the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves are? And what was interesting is the younger kids definitely didn't know this spinal cord thing. They sometimes had heard of the spine. They confused the word nerves with nervousness because they're concrete thinkers. So it's like, oh, that's what you feel when you're on stage doing ballet or something like that. And some other kids confuse nerves with other structures, like veins, for instance. You can see here, the brain, the nerves, and the spinal cord are all in the head for this kid. Here they're spread out, but there's nothing in the legs. Here, nothing's connected, but they're all roughly in the right spot. And you can see the various conceptualizations. When no frameworks or answers are given, this is what they're guessing. And everyone put the brain in the head. And I think in the culture, this was in Australia, it seems pretty clear that we're currently teaching kids their brain is the boss and it's in their head and it's clever. Some of these ideas are getting through pretty young in our society, but there's lots of ideas that aren't. And I guess my work has been trying to work out what's the most helpful things to get into kids' curriculums at different ages. Here's some quotes from parents about kids from a recent study that's just been published, actually. And they said, a parent would take all the pain from their child if they could, and then thus suffer side by side with the child. Or in the green here, when things are bad for her, they're bad for everyone because we're aware of how she suffers and it affects us. That's that influence on everyone. We want that common language for everyone to speak. In the purple, I hope that someone may be able to shine some light on what the problem is and have a solution for her to get her life back. And so my question at the bottom here is, could a common vocabulary help? Let's think about some teacher quotes. And this is from a study that's in preparation from my PhD student, Beck Fechner. This is a quote from teachers. So a teacher said, at the moment, we just go with our gut instincts. This is about pain in the classroom. So something that would give it that knowledge, and that knowledge would be consistent so that everyone deals with it in a similar way. That's what they wanted. Or in the green, there should be a consistent approach for the teachers and the students. So I think that the idea of having the teacher well-being linked with student well-being. And it was a really interesting discussion to see education professionals who aren't trained in health talk about health using that educational language. Things like well-being and resilience came up a lot. And again, could a common vocabulary help? Should health professionals be pushing their education onto to schools? I'm not sure. A lot of work needs to be done. This was a fantastic study from a team in the UK. Rhiannon and Jocelyn led this. What was fascinating is about this idea of a turning point. And so someone with chronic pain, a kid with chronic pain, often when they were about to get better, there was this salient moment where they had a turning point and they got better. And my hunch is, and I feel like education and learning could really facilitate those turning points. So if you have a look at these, this perceived control, like I feel trapped, I'm afraid, I'll protect it, I've got low mood. And in the paper it says changes in perceived control were reflected in the language used. So from negative things like pain stopped me and I couldn't, to over here, or now they have perceived control. I believed in recovery. I want to, I can. I'm not gonna let it stop me. And you can see how the language changes when someone has one of these turning points. And I wonder again, could a common vocabulary help? So what could this vocabulary be? We've sat down with some kids. Let me show you a video of one little boy chatting about pain and how it works.
If you're about to get hurt, your senses send electrical messages to your brain, up to your brain, and your brain says, should I make pain or not? If it does not, it's normally because they don't think there's a great possibility of you getting hurt. But if they do, then it's like it's a great possibility.
Yeah, fascinating, isn't it?
Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Great. So if you're joining and you're watching the recording at a later time, that's fine. Hi and welcome. Sorry you can't join the Q&A. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this stuff. This is kids understanding the science of pain as best as they can with their concrete thinking, amazing, clever, changeable brains, and then articulating it. And I think there's real value in that. We've been doing a study this last couple of years, and this one's a pilot study. We're using a draft version of the very first book in the series. And it wasn't finished. It was an early draft. And some of the things the kids said was really helpful about thinking in terms of how to develop the books even better. So one of the kids was like, I really like the pictures. They helped me to understand it. And so it became, actually from some of these comments, it became more comic-based and interactive and dynamic imagery. The purple quote, it was quite interesting. It made a lot of sense. And sense making is a big strategy that psychologists use. Yeah, it was really helpful to hear some of this feedback in like paragraphs of text, but I've just put a line there for you. In the red, the rhyming was good. The story could be a bit longer. And at that time, the early draft really just said the main point once. It didn't have any repetition. It didn't look at it from multiple perspectives. It didn't have the interactive activities at the end. So the feedback from this study informed the next versions of book one. And now, this is probably 6 or 7 versions later that the final product came. And it also helped the development of the whole series, like the series as a whole. Really nice line, I love this. Talking about children's books is kids say they keep coming back to it, and parents say this too. So in the study we asked, how many times have you read the book since you received it each week, and how many times did you watch the video of the book being read? The videos were rewatched either 0 or 1 times in total across a 6-week period, whereas books were reread 2 to 4 times per week. And so in terms of developing that vocabulary and becoming familiar with the characters and the plot and the understanding, hopefully, the idea here is because of that repetition, it's becoming a common thing. So in this study, I won't go into too much depth, but basically I just want you to see that these lines are kind of going everywhere. And so this is related to an item in a questionnaire that says, the brain processes lots of details before you feel pain. So it's a bit of a challenging item, and we weren't sure how younger kids would be responding. And we saw a lot of variability, whereas in adults, often there's a bit more stability in the way they're responding over time. So this is over a 6-week period. You can see some kids were strongly agreeing, some were agreeing, some were unsure, some were disagreeing. No one was strongly disagreeing by the end. But it was just really interesting to see that variability live. And our question was, is that just the survey, or what would they say in an interview? And so we also interviewed these kids. And now we matched up their responses in the survey with their responses in the interview. So if you look just in these 3 columns and you go across each participant, you can see sometimes the interviewer matched up with the child, which matched up with the survey. So that happened 12 times out of the 17 participants who did everything. But other times it didn't. And the survey didn't indicate what the interviews did, or the interviewer thought something different to the kid. And the challenge is now, what's the gold standard? Assessment is quite complex. And so to evaluate the effectiveness of things like these children's books, it's quite challenging. And so, yeah, we're thinking really hard about what these outcomes are and what prevention would look like. And so if you're maybe, a researcher or you're working as a researcher, I'd love to hear your thoughts and to work together. It was a really fascinating study, and we're writing this up at the moment, so it will be available hopefully very soon. One thing, I guess, the take-home message here was many things are influencing conceptual change. If we take the kids' word for it in the interviews, for instance, we could see that the real books were influencing their way of thinking. We could even see that the fact the sham mentioned the word brain seemed to influence their survey results, but probably didn't influence the way they think about the brain. They just changed their answers to some of the survey results. Even just the fact they were filling out the questionnaire like 9 times in 6 weeks seemed to cause some level of reflection. And in the interviews, the interviewers commented on how the kids seem to be kind of learning as they're talking about it and as they're doing drawings and all this sort of stuff. So it was a really nice way of exploring how do kids change the way they think about something. And it does seem like a change is needed. It's not that kids are born understanding pain biopsychosocially. So I want to quickly share a snippet with you from one of the books. This is from the second book, Zoe Zoppens, and it's called Zoe Zoppens Lights It Up. And she goes and visits her grandma, and in this book, I'll just flick through, there's a bunch of coloured lights that influence her amount of pain. It's based on a real study. And it says this: so if a little light can change the volume of pain, plenty more is possible in your brainy brain. Before I read the rest, I'll just quickly point out, there's this recurring metaphor, visual metaphor that we've got in all the books. And you can see the little Zoe characters we're imagining there in her thoughts and in her brain. And they're all wearing different shirts with different labels. So expectations, what you can see, you fear, you feel, think, move, understand, remember, the place you're in. All of these things are influencing. And so we're introducing that idea now. And so over here, it goes back to the Dr. Seuss style. It says, not only what we see or even all our fears, it's the place and what we feel. It's even our ideas. It's what we think might happen, even what is planned. It's also how we move, even what we understand. Pause the experiment. What was going on inside Zoe's brain when different lights shone? And then you can compare and contrast. You can sit down with a kid and go through why a red light might change some of these variables. And then Zoe comes to this realization of maybe anything and everything can change pain, and then works through a whole bunch of different scenarios. And we're seeing books like this create like a learning journey that kids want to keep coming back to and trying to understand and apply in different parts of their life. So here's a few quotes I heard from a bunch of different types of stakeholders. A clinician emailed me and said, I use these books with a 12-year-old who had CRPS of their hand. She loved it. It helped give some really nice structure to the session. This green comment is from a parent, and they said, we've read the books a number of times. They ignited something in him. He immediately started to write things down and was excited. I am convinced the books are what helped him in hospital. Incredible. Here's a quote from a kid. This little girl said, I give a gold medal to the third book. a silver to the fifth and bronze to the second. I just love the one at school, the red book, because our brains are amazing, and that's the virtual reality adventure inside the brain. And today I got this one from a parent who overheard their son talking to their friend, and her son was saying, "Hey, you will like these books because Uncle Ozzy is like your dad. Hey, has your dad ever had a nail in his boot?" I just think it's really nice, and if you think about that language and the conversation that the books is creating, it's allowing more scaffolding of learning to happen over time. It's like, oh yeah, that's not like my dad in this way, or it is like my dad in this way, and then they can keep building and learning upon those experiences. Oh, this was another fun thing that happened. I was sent one of these, a little toy, Zoe. So if you know anyone who is a toy designer or who crafts stuff, send in little artworks and stuff. That's fun. I love that. And just a final reminder before we jump into the Q&A questions. The online portal is yours to check out. Go and have a look, zoeandzackspainhacks.com. So at the end of each book, there's the activity section, and then that takes you to the online platform. It's got printables, heaps of videos, lots of great stuff. And there's also those pages for parents and teachers and clinicians. So do go and check that out, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. And that's continuing to be developed and growing over time. So thank you so much. Thank you for joining these webinars. And even if this is, I don't know, 2025 and you're joining this, I hope you've watched all of them in order. That would be awesome. But I would still love, I'm sure, in 2 years' time, I'd still love to hear your questions, your feedback, and your suggestions and ideas. This is going to be a growing project. This is going out into all sorts of places around the world. And so I'm really excited. Please, do reach out. It's fun and it's cool to have that communication back and forward. So any suggestions and ideas are very, very welcome. As I have done in each video webinar, I really want to say thanks to the Noi Group team, all these expert reviewers. A lot of them received their copies of the series as a thank you this week, so that's very exciting. The families who participate in all the research studies we run are just brilliant, I must say. A huge thank you to them. Schools are starting to get involved, and similarly, some of these people, like often a school has a champion within them who's driving a lot of the research. It's amazing. Some of the work they do is brilliant, and we should be very grateful for these educators. And my family has to put up with me setting up a webinar every Tuesday night in February. Now, and years and years of development and help, and so thank you to my wife and kids. So you can check out any of the 4 webinars. You can share them. They're on YouTube and Vimeo. It's all available, ready to go. We're in the 4th one right now, so that will obviously be uploaded very shortly. But thanks again for your time. And let's go to the Q&A now. So if you have any questions, I wanted to try and wrap this up in 20 minutes tonight, but we're kind of over time. So if there's any questions, I'll go to the Q&A and have a quick look. Great. So the first question I can see is just, how does my school get involved? Okay. I don't know who's asking this. How does my school get involved? It could be from a parent's perspective, I guess, having a conversation with some of the key people in the school potentially could be a starting point, even with the classroom teacher. Or you could reach out to us, the research teams that are doing this work in different places, and we can try and get in touch with different people. But yeah, for official research to be done, ethics approval in Australia, the system is ethics approval needs to happen at a state level for a public school, or like the governing kind of area for different private schools. And then we get approval from the principal, then there's teachers need to be involved. Often there's a professional development. Lots of steps need to happen. So it doesn't just roll out immediately. But in terms of getting your school involved, like today or tomorrow, what you can do is contact the school librarian, contact the librarian in your local library, and then they can get the books and then kids can start reading them. And I think that's a really nice starting point. I have heard whispers of me doing school visits as well, so you can reach out about that, and that's a possibility. There's a speaker's agent and a few things getting sorted at the moment, so that's exciting. So I think they'd probably be the main ways, and I guess you could get the books, share them with your friends. That would be kind of the start. I think that's what's going to happen over these next couple of months. But yeah, it's very, very exciting. So thank you for that. It's a nice question. Cool. Actually, let's leave it there. I don't want to go over time. I don't want this to become a really, really long webinar. I've tried to include a lot of the quotes and data from the week that's just passed. So thank you again for joining me. And I hope it's been really helpful and interesting and useful. And I hope it generates lots of conversation. So feel free to share this and share the other videos. That would be a really nice way of getting this kind of vocabulary out to lots of people. So thanks again, and I'll see you next time I see you. Bye.